We are rocking and rolling. We're back and going to do 2 streams this week, and then we're going to take a couple weeks off. And we will be back. We won't be back until the 9th of January when we have class, and our class this semester is from 3 to 4:20 Eastern Standard Time. So we're back in the game, back in the room. Hey, so have a kind of a really interesting, very interesting conversation for me today, and we're really going to try to cut out at 6. But here's a thought about how we're going to start to work this. During the semester, we invite students up to the front of the room, and I don't know what the students are going to say, or whatever I know what the conversation is going to be. I know what kinds of questions I'm going to ask them, but basically, I pick a topic like immigration or multiculturalism or speaking, learning a foreign language or a second language or anything. I don't know, the way they think about skin color or something like that. And then I just ask them to find out what this generation or different configurations of the generation thinks about it. So and then we have students from other countries. So I never know until they're sitting on the table and I start asking them questions, what it is that they're going to say. And I don't really know much about any of the students. Well, we're going to run these live streams and kind of similarly when we're not in a classroom. And it's so fascinating for me to invite people onto the stream in the same way that I invite students onto the table in the front of the room and just ask people questions because I'm curious. And I'm not interested in speaking with experts just because I'm not. I don't know, whatever. I don't need that. I can go read the books of experts, or I can, listen to some podcast or whatever the case is. I'm really interested in speaking with people. And mostly it's people who reach out to me, reach out to us, to Jeff and I, and say like, hey, I'd be interested in volunteering and coming on, in the same way the students reach out to volunteer. And to hear what people have to say. It's like kind of a, very much a Studs Terkel approach to, he's an old ethnographer, a Studs Terkel approach to understanding what people are thinking. So today's conversation is about conservatism. And I'm just really curious about how people are thinking about conservatism, because so that's it. So we invited 4 people on who in some way identify, not, again, it's conservative with a small c, but at least embrace many of the sort of what are some of the core components of conservatism. But those are shifting and changing all the time, man. So here we are, like, we're going to have a conversation. So, Jeff, why don't you bring everybody on and I will say something. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. And I will, awesome, man. And hang on, we have Christian. We'll do, hang on, we'll make sure his internet is stable. Let's see if we get him on before there you are, man. All right. You're out in Oregon, so you got, everything's a bit unstable out there. So we'll see. Hey, while we're getting Christian sort of set up, why don't we just start? Say just where you are, and we don't say anything about what you think, because that's irrelevant. We're just going to talk. But Ari, why don't we start with you? Where are you? And yeah,
I'm in Las Vegas. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, awesome. And Marie?
Albany, New York.
Albany, New York. Yep. And Kyle?
Yeah, Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, Tennessee, man. Yeah, it's awesome. Hey, and we'll see if we get Christian. He was on for a while. So Jeff, why don't we just you and I can communicate in the private stream, and you can let me know if he's what's happening. We'll see if we can do it. Hey, so listen, you all. I I have this idea myself that, people are all over the place politically wise, right? Like we dichotomize this thing, conservatives and liberals and Republicans and Democrats. I mean, it's just so insane for me as a sociologist, because I know that human beings are a very complex mix of a wide range of thoughts and ideas, and there's no way that we can categorize people inside of a box, like the boxes that right now the four of us are in, right? There's no way to do that. But I have the idea that most people, half of their thinking is what we would typically say is kind of like the classic liberal thinking, and half of their thinking we would say
Mhm.
is classic conservative thinking, whatever those things are. And so I don't know, like, just could we just say a couple things about that? Like how like, do you have a really hard time when people ask you, like, "What do you think?" or "Where do you stand?" or, like, how difficult is it for you, I should say? Let me make it an open-ended question. Yeah. Marie, let me just start with you
Sure.
because
I was actually dying to say something. Anyways, so I guess like I feel like a good place to start is both parties have kind of flipped almost a 180. Oh, excuse me,
Mhm, mhm.
360 from what they started as. And I don't think a majority of Americans are even aware.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the Republican Party starting as the non-slavery party, and the whole
Yeah,
gamut,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
and the Democrats, etc. And it's almost like I went from, at one point, I wrote some notes down, but I went from one point where I was thinking that they were totally flipped. And now when I look, there's almost like a very fine line between the two parties.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Besides a different face on each side, because they've gotten so far away from the original values, which
Yeah.
is could be said for America in general. Um, but there's one thing I wanted to highlight. I've watched a lot of your classes. I think I've mentioned that to you a few times. And I like that because I've taken a lot of sociology, and I haven't. Our classes weren't streamed, so they weren't
Mhm,
shared. Those All those conversations are gone, and yours are still coming around. Sometimes I even
mhm.
rewatch stuff from years ago, but without talking too much. I'm sorry. That's what women do. I have. I feel that, without getting off of the conservative piece, I feel like conservatives are more along the biblical end, and we can't just see Trump as the face
Yeah.
of, of that. However, I feel like leftists have become, the party has become very racialized,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
uh, for lack of a better term, hijacked by some
Mhm,
other
mhm.
agenda. And why I say this is, like you said, there's many ways to put the four of us in boxes, and one of them is racially. And
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah,
next to no one that would look at me and say, "Oh, look at that African American. Oh,
yeah,
look at that American Indian with a tribal card, by the way." No one would say
yeah,
that. And they certainly wouldn't say I'm Asian, but clearly with my skin tone, they can see that, I'm white too. But with that being said, I'm not in any of those boxes in any kind of way. But
yeah,
what was interesting about the last election, why Trump possibly lost to Biden, was the Native Americans. They
yeah,
voted in record numbers, and I noticed
yeah,
you include them in a lot of your discussions.
yeah,
However, recently I found out that he gave, I think it's like $1 billion to Palestine or Jerusalem. I don't know.
yeah,
I can't even watch it because I have been on reservations. I don't live on one, but that's
yeah,
part of my heritage. And the very people that voted him in, he has forgotten. That kind of piggybacks on immigration. If we're
yeah.
not
Okay.
taking care of the people in our country.
So let me respond to that, and I want to hear what Ari has to say about this issue. So what I'm hearing from you is that this and this is what I hear from so many people,
Mhm.
right? First off, just set the political parties aside, because I like right now I don't want to talk about political parties at all, because it really is really irrelevant, right? Um, that there's people just identify you. What I'm hearing from you is you identify in an incredibly complex way,
Mhm.
and that there's no, if you think about what you said about the origin of these parties, but again, I don't want to go there. It's just immensely complex for you. And so like, what's it even mean then to put your ideas in a box, so to speak?
Mhm.
Ari, I feel like that's very true for you, probably.
Yeah, I'm really not too concerned about the political party side of things these days. And in fact, I'm my concern is that, like, actual ideas and policies are themselves hardly discussed, and
Mhm.
and
Uh-huh.
the idea of discourse is just not even on the table anymore. And as far as like where I'm at, I so the box I guess you could put me in, most easily or most identifiably would be like a classical liberal,
Uh-huh.
and so coming from the other side of the aisle, where when you say conservative, I think liberals like would identify that as, uh, a conservative is like a Christian conservative. So like
Yeah,
conservative
yeah, yeah.
value being like, someone that's pro-life, and
Yeah.
like just those typical things. So like,
Which
again,
is absolutely bizarre to me, right? Like,
right,
yeah, that we just pick a couple issues out and they become the
Mhm.
issues that we use to
Mhm.
identify. Yeah.
right, and where it's like, I certainly think that there's importance and value in things like family values or whatever, and like there's
Uh-huh.
there's things that are lost when those get devalued or whatever, when
Uh-huh.
you denigrate them to the extent that they have been. But those have also like a very, they're not prioritized in my personal view the way that some people would think they are for a conservative. um and like the liberty aspects are, or more, I guess I would say the role of government is a better way to put, where I
Uh-huh.
emphasize my beliefs. And like, so I'm a big believer in the US Constitution, and I just think it's a brilliant, brilliant document. And where when you think of something like American exceptionalism, it's
Uh-huh.
not
Uh-huh.
like the thing where I think, or some conservatives may think, that, oh, God just loves us more than the rest of the world,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
like
yeah,
where
yeah. Yeah.
the U.S. in a lot of ways, where we are, ahead of, or the top dog, or however you want to put it. It's not because God loves us, more or whatever, or that it's that
Uh-huh.
our founders created this brilliant document and created these checks and balances, um, and recognized the corruptive nature of power,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and just, um, put all of these measures into place, not just
Yeah.
in the ways of how we created laws, but then the different layers up between, states' rights and, national power, and,
Mhm.
Hey,
legislative,
so
the various
okay,
ways.
let me ask you this. Then when you say uh, the way I see American exceptionalism it's not, I don't see it in a kind of a vertical axis, but more on like kind of a horizontal axis, that, and I say this a lot, like the fact that the United States has been around, we're coming up to 250 years, right? And we've only had one civil war. But we've almost had another one really in the 60s. We easily could have fractured. And there've
Mhm.
been probably a couple other times when we may have been, but man, only one civil war. Like, holy smokes. Like, that's pretty exceptional for a society. You know, we're talking about Europe, which is what we're going to talk about on Thursday. I'm going to talk with some Europeans about what's happening there with regard to nationalism and immigration. But man, if you watch one of these maps of Europe over the past 250 years and you watch how just the countries are changing, the borders are changing, it's like, oh my God, that's exceptional. And
Yeah.
and I think it's worth really seeing that. Yeah.
And to that similar end, we are in a way technically the oldest nation on the planet right now, in the sense of we have the longest running government without a change of government of any other government on the world. You know, since we've been established in was it 1789, I believe, there's no other single running government that's been in place as long as we have. And even though you'd think that the U.S. is super young compared to like China or, you know, the UK or whatever, our government has actually been stable and around longer than any of these other governments have.
So hey, by the way, I don't know that that's true. But anyway, I'll be curious if someone says it in the chat. I mean, how it's true. It's true. It's at a certain level for sure. Hey, let me ask you this then. So if someone calls you, if I said, hey, where do you lean, right? And you would say, well, I lean toward kind of what we'd consider to be classical liberalism, meaning like individual liberties and individual rights, and a smaller rather than larger government, right?
Correct.
It's what I would hear you say. Yeah. Okay. That seems to me like that would be classic conservative type thinking. You know, Marie, you mentioned like the hijacking by the on the liberal side. Well, the hijacking on the so-called Republican so-called conservative side is a hijacking by the people linking that thinking to certain kinds of religious thinking. Hey, Kyle, how about you, man? What's your
I kind of like that you called out to just not use the parties. I think, like, especially Democrats, I think that's such an inadequate term to describe the modern left and the modern kind of liberal ideal, if you will. It's not as homogenous as that, and it's certainly not strictly political. So I think that the parties are wearing out their welcomes. I think we see more and more that people are wanting to run independently coming out of larger parties, and I think they are gaining more traction. So it's not just like Ralph Nader running, third party to no votes basically every cycle.
And getting like 2.5 million votes. Yeah.
Right. But I do think that I don't know that I want to call it a dichotomy, but there is something in the modes of coming to conclusions or coming to prescriptions for problems. And so there are ways that people consider issues that are reused in almost like formulas that get reused on various topics, and they may or may not be valid to whatever it is that somebody's considering. So I do think that there is some kind of finite small number of ways that people come up with to kind of view things. And so
hey, let me go ahead. Finish. Yeah. I was going to ask, what is it about? So when you think about your thinking, right? So with Ari, he was saying kind of like a classical liberal thinking, meaning like, you want to empower individuals to be educated, to be thoughtful, to be smart, to have the opportunity to work hard if they really want to work hard, and not infringe on the rights of other people. That's really essential, right? And also you want to have is the smallest government that you can have. You got to have government because there's no way to get people.
Absolutely.
To get people to work together. I mean, you got to work together. It's like on the highways. You got to have speed limits. You have to have road bumps. You have to have lines in the road. Well, not in Egypt, by the way, man. I was driving in Egypt and there are no lines in the road and people are going all over the place. It's the most beautiful orchestration of driving I'd ever seen in my life. But Kyle, would you say that kind of shapes the way you think, or would that kind of characterizes how you see the world?
Yeah, in a sense. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the phrase before that you can do surgery better with a scalpel than a shotgun. And I look at the federal government as shotgun politics, and what we were supposed to be is the local government was the most important, and each step you take out was supposed to be less and less influential. And I think we've gone the other way. I think there are a lot of people that couldn't name the mayor of their city that could tell you a lot about the contemporary kind of federal conversation.
So do people around you, not just the people you associate with, but to what degree do people around you think like you think? Like people in your area of Tennessee, like how many are?
You would think that it would be a lot of conservatives, and there are certainly, Tennessee is a red state for sure.
Yeah.
But Nashville itself is not. And so.
But how about? Well, when you say conservative thinking, I'm talking about this conservative thinking, which is like individual liberties, the small, not too many of the individual liberties, right? Like area, like you can't have too many. I mean, obviously there are some things that we have to control because that's just the nature of human beings. But smaller rather than large government.
Yes.
Would you see that?
Yeah.
That's the default.
I'm wondering if one of you, and then we'll wait and see. Hey, Christian. All right. So my question is, let's see. How are you doing? Oh man, I think we might have to. I think Christian, I have a feeling we're gonna have to bring you on on a different day, which is fine. Try talking.
Sam.
Let me see if we can hear you. Yeah. Hey, Jeff, why don't we just work with Christian? We'll just bring him on a different time. So, Eric,
Sam,
go ahead, Eric.
I wanted to kind of add something to what Kyle was saying, and to our conversation we were having prior to getting on. I think cannabis, what's been happening with cannabis in the last decade is a perfect illustration of how these constitutionally with this, this classical liberal values and ideas works so perfectly. Referring to the 10th Amendment in particular, which is, states' rights, right? Which how with smaller government works more efficiently. Where so what you have in normally you would think of when you were going to legalize something, you would have you'd pass a law. And so you'd have just one law where you would regulate something for the whole entire country, right? But what happened with cannabis is each individual state now has been passing their own law and regulating it how they see fit. Okay, and so you have this notion. I think Louis Brandeis was the one who coined the term. It's called 50 laboratories of democracy. Which was kind of the original vision of the founders, where so now every individual state is in this process of basically handling how they want to do cannabis in their own individual way. And maybe that's not going to end up being, 15, 20 years from now. But what's happening for us now is we have this opportunity where, Nevada's doing their thing, California, Colorado, and so forth, is all doing their own things, and they're all different in their own little ways. And you have now this opportunity where best practices are given their chance to be elevated and be observed.
Right.
And whereas if the federal government passed one law, they virtually get it wrong every time they've done it, without exception. Where something gets screwed up, if not 100 things get screwed up in the process. Where this way, over a period of 10 or 20 years, you get to say, okay, this state did it like this, and this was good, this was bad. We raised revenue this way. You catch my point. Where by using the form of government that was closer to the individual, you had this means of democracy working in a much more efficient way. And then if you taken it to an even closer way, so let's say not the state, but the county passed their law, it would be even more so. And so like this is a way that the average person doesn't maybe analyze the way that power can be spread out or regulated in a form that it could be
Well,
or
it's
should be.
let me say this, and then we'll go to you. It's like the balance, right? How power can be, it can constantly be balanced out and leveled out. The more people
Right.
you have involved in
Because
decision making.
when power gets like power likes to coalesce around itself, right? And that's when it gets corrupted. But if you keep it spread out, power always is corruptible, but the less it can gravitate around itself, then there's just less to be manipulated by individuals.
Let me make one final statement, Marie, and then I just want to define power in a moment, just something really fast. When people come together so by the way, you were speaking as a sociologist, right? This is like your words are just completely this the way I see stuff, because in the end, human beings have to work together. And that means we have at some level to agree on what the rules are going to be that the majority of us, that A, all of us are going to have to act on, right? Or B, members of certain groups are going to act on, or C, we're going to be able to get the majority of people to do. Because you got to do that. You have to have rules. Like you have to have a traffic police and traffic rules, or traffic is just chaotic. Well, so is social life and all of life. And so in a way, then this what you were saying is like really classical, what would be the best possible conservative thinking, you know what I mean? In this way of like, no, we don't want we don't want single government entities making, we want to limit the degree to which single entities make decisions for entire populations, right? We want to limit that, but you're going to have some of it, but you want to try to limit it. And that's conservative thinking in a way. But in order to have that, and then Maria, this is you next. In order to have that, individuals have to be thoughtful and communicative with one another, right? This is where the liberal side comes. Like, you got to educate people, and you got to have people feeling empowered so that they can say, all right, hang on, let me step up and let me take responsibility for myself here. Because if I don't take responsibility for myself, that means other people have to take responsibility for me, and that's a problem. Anyway, Marie, you were gonna.
Yes, I just wanted to backtrack. So this really has nothing to do with parties either. So my experience is quite similar to yours. I'm a teacher, although in prison systems for many years. So I've taught tens of thousands of students who are struggling academically in any kind of way you can dream of. And I'm sure you have had a broad gamut of, I can see some of your classes are really large. So I'm coming from that background. However, with a little twist, pretty much across the board, all of my students were not knowledgeable of anything that we're talking about today. Although when they go to a court of law, they are sentenced with the Constitution. So when this last election made it really clear to me that so I make it known I'm not very political. I'm just in the middle, and I don't like to be forced to. I like this. This is what I like. I believe this, but the average American wants to somehow separate us. However, what dawned on me that was beyond everything I just said, that is true for both parties and a large percentage of Americans, is that besides, and by the way, these aren't even the articles, these are amendments. Besides the amendments of the right to protest and freedom of speech, a lot of Americans don't know there's anything else. Like the articles come before. And that's a huge problem, because we have people controlling this nation that are very unaware. And I had to teach it to kids that had no clue of that. And a lot of these kids have done things, well, all of them have done things out in their communities and different things. And I actually taught a pilot college course there with a neighboring college. And we brought in regular college students to debate with these kids after we taught them the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And we literally had a sentencing judge come from New York City to debate and judge the same student that he gave a life sentence to years prior. It was like everyone was crying. But
Yeah.
what you learned is that I had tens of thousands of students, and I know you have, but if you can just look out into your classrooms or
Mm-hmm.
your large auditorium and just imagine how many of those kids or youth, or young people,
Mm-hmm.
were not aware of the basic principles, but it's almost like, I think somebody did say it's something about the streets in Egypt. Imagine people
Yeah. Yeah.
driving
Yeah.
on a plane without their license or without
Yeah.
experience. Then no lines.
Yeah.
That would be,
So
and I just
here,
wanted to pull that out.
yeah. So here, let me respond to that. That's I think that part of where we, again, systems break down when
Mhm,
people are not contributing to them, right?
mhm,
And so what we have, strangely enough, is we have this whole kind of neoconservative movement or whatever that has
mhm,
decided, hey, we're just going to pass an endless amount of rules, but they're rules
mhm,
and laws that we want to pass. And then you have the classic liberal movement, which is, the
mhm,
ideas, which is, hey, what we need is to have really thoughtful, participatory individuals who can step up and really think for themselves and act in ways that, if they're thinking for themselves and they're doing best for themselves, they're also going to have a natural inclination to do best for other people around them, and
mhm,
which is kind of classic libertarian type thinking, which is
mhm,
classic conservative type thinking. And I think you just gave a great example of that, say in a prison, right? Like, give people the opportunity to really, young people, to grow and to think, and they'll
mhm,
do it, man. They'll come through.
mhm,
Hey Kyle, if you think about my class, right? So you watch my class. What is it about when you think about these kinds of things that we're talking about, what is it about my class that is really interesting to you? This guy living, right outside of Nashville, Tennessee,
mhm.
Yeah,
in a red
the
state.
first
Yeah.
the first thing that was interesting to me was that it showed up in my YouTube feed. Um,
Uh-huh.
that was I don't know why, but it did. And
Algorithms.
so I watched. I can't remember what the first one was, but it was one of the ones that you were kind of role playing the conservative view. I think actually it was the conservative narrative
Uh-huh.
from several years ago, and it was a conversation with your students about what they hear in the news and what do they think when they see these logos. And I think you pulled up like Breitbart and Fox News and things
Uh-huh.
like that. And it was like, what does your mind go to? Showed a picture of Trump, of Candace Owens, um, and it was interesting to me. I had emailed you, and one of the things that it seemed like was very difficult was to get a conservative to speak up as loudly as the liberals in the room.
Uh-huh.
And there had always seemed to be somebody that would kind of not even be a conservative, so to speak, but somebody that would offer a counter opinion that would preface with well, I'm not conservative.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
just make sure no one makes that mistake. And so,
Don't see me that way. Yeah.
right. And so, I found that to be really interesting. And then you did a conversation about Nicholas Sandmann and
Yeah.
his MAGA
Yeah.
hat. And one of the things that I super,
Oh,
super appreciated was when you, like off camera, go find some kid's Penn State hat, hold it up to the camera and say, what does this mean? As everybody's kind of,
mm,
dogpiling on this. Well, the kid's wearing a MAGA hat, so he deserved it. And you show this Penn State hat and say, this means to a lot of people, pedophile state university. And
Yeah.
all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I don't know what exactly went through people's heads at that moment. Over half the class, I think, had some sort of Penn State gear
Oh,
on.
dude, totally.
And,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
and I was like, that's really interesting. And I wish that there was a kid there that could capitalize on that moment. And so then I reached out and said, can I offer some kind of perspective at some point?
Dude, that was okay. I stumble upon things a lot in that room because it's happening really fast, right? And people are coming, people are going, and I'm trying to keep my job by not saying anything really that I shouldn't be saying, which is not easy, man. But that was I remember when I did that. That just came to me in the moment. I've probably done about 3 or 4 things in my entire teaching career that I would label be really, really creative and maybe borderline brilliant, and that was one of them, right? That was intense. Okay, so I think, so for you then have appreciated my ability to take these very simple things like that and 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 give a conservative twist to it. What would be conservative? Right. I don't know. Hey, by the way, you should know that students, on average, young people of that 20 something, right? They lean toward being more liberal, as we say, right? I mean, they do, because it's when you go off to college, you read your first thing about prisons, or you read your first thing about Native Americans, right? American Indians, or whatever it is, you learn about something, and then you see the problems in the world, and in many ways for the first time, and you start thinking, oh shit, we have to. This is not good, man. This is not good. We need to solve this, right? We need to fix these problems, and then why don't we do something? And then the we becomes, why doesn't the government do something? Like, we should all do this, right? It's like not thinking, no, all the taxpayers have to agree on what it is that we're going to do to solve this problem. And that's where the complication comes in. But then people lean toward starting to make demands to fix the problems that they see, whether it's with racism or sexism or poverty or anything. It doesn't, or war. And so people go through that period of time, and I see that with my students, and that's okay. And that's okay. I mean, it's good. I'm always uplifted by that. I'm downtrodden when I run into people who are 20 years old and they're already cynical. It's like, fuck the world. We can't fix the world. It's all over, whatever. So anyway, so that's one of the things that goes on in the classroom. And they have the idea that to say you're conservative means to say, and they pick out all the things that just seem to be against fixing the world, right? Which is not true at all, right? But they have that idea. And so that's like the minimalist level of understanding. And that's why you see that. That's why it's harder. As well, one final thing, my wife says this all the time. We teach a narrative that's more aligned with so-called the current liberal thinking, not traditional, not like classical liberal thinking, and we don't teach really thoughtful. Conservative thinking, like really, really, like, come on, man, like we don't do that. So therefore, we miss out.
I was just having a discussion with a more left-leaning friend of mine recently, and there was just like this base assumption in his argument or logic or whatever that, it's like, he's like, well, I'm sorry, I care about the little guy. And it's like, what are you saying? I don't care about, other people. Like this is the problem, it never occurs to him or to people of that mindset that there are arguments on the right, or however you want to frame it, that maybe your philosophy is not helping the little guy, like it automaticely, it's do it my way, or if you don't, it's because you're selfish, or you only, you're greedy, or like, it's like, no, there's there's many things going on there. There's like, there's that term bleeding heart, right? And it's like, well, what happens to a bleeding heart eventually? Like, you run out of blood or whatever. There's many different things going on. Or it's like, I remember watching a couple videos about like liberals from the 60s and 70s that were saying like, we thought, these projects of public housing that we did was going to help these inner city people, and all we did was we created the ghetto, and we were wrong in a lot of situations, or like with certain aspects of welfare programs where it's like create this this cycle of dependency, and like it's not to say that we don't need some sort of social security net, but like to continually just say we need to throw money at a problem over and over and over again. There are it's not even just an issue of budgeting, which is an issue in itself.
Yeah.
There are consequences to that, but when you create a situation where you make it when you deter somebody from going out and getting a job because it's more attractive to stay on the dole, so to speak, you create like this gap in a person's young like professional career where it's like, okay, then for like they have this gap of 5, 6, 7 years where they're not building up their resume, and it's like, well, this person is, they're making minimum wage and they're 30 years old, and what it's like, look, man, if they're 30 years old making minimum wage, like that just didn't just happen, somebody is working hard, even if they're at Walmart or whatever, they don't stay at minimum wage, like they're you know what I mean, like,
hey,
but anyway,
Ari, I want to just say something about that. So one of the struggles that we have, this goes back to the really big government idea that somehow from far away we can make a decision that will have impacts on lots and lots and lots of people. And the more people, this is basic sociology, right? This is also where the more people that we try to impact with particular decisions and laws and rules, et cetera, the more likely we are to miss the mark, right? So Kyle, you said this. Was it you or was it Christian who said fix something instead of a scalpel, a shotgun?
Yeah. Surgery with a shotgun instead of a scalpel.
Yeah. So this is like the sociology stuff. So if I go to like not like stripping away or weakening people's resolve to kind of really work themselves into a different place, it's like, well, that happens at any job, right? It's not it happens at my place of employment, every place of employment. If employees don't see a reason to really work hard and move forward, then
teachers is a perfect example. Totally.
For an example, yeah. So Christian, you can weigh in on this then. Teachers, yeah, it's endless. You can work 24/7, 365 as a teacher and never ever stop, right? So, well, it's time. You gotta like, yeah. And Marie, I forgot you too. So the three. So, but at some point in time, you hang on. I'm thinking I lost. We can. Some people are going to stop way short. They're just going to stop way short. And some people are going to work overtime to make it happen. Just think about teachers, right? So then we got the people that stop way short. They just really don't put the energy in. And so now we got to make a rule for that. Okay, teachers, like, so at Penn State, for example, what we have to do is we have to sign every semester. We have to fill out a form and send it to the state and tell people how many hours a week we're working on average. Just stupid stuff, right? So they start passing laws for the hoops we got to jump through. And like, because a few people stop way short. And so this is the endless battle that human beings have in trying to create a sociological system that is beneficial for as many people as it can possibly be.
It's been a big problem with the public teachers unions, where
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
no matter how hard you work or how little you work, you get the same level of increase in pay, and you advance at the same pace. So it's like took out all the incentive for you to want to work hard or not work hard, or
No, and and those unions are really good, right? Like they have a lot of benefits. They have all unions have many benefits for many things in lots of ways, and yet they have detriments. They have negative side effects. And so it's like, okay, well, unintended consequences. And this is what life is, right? So I think one of the things, so Christian, I want to hear what you would say about this, but this is one of the things that I'm always trying to do in my class, which is point out the many different positive and negative sides of everything we can possibly look at, and so that just to complicate it as much as possible. Christian, what is it about so when we're thinking about these questions of conservatism, so you haven't really spoken yet down in Nashville, or no, you're in Oregon.
I'm in Oregon, yeah.
Salem, Oregon. What is it that first drew you to watching the Social 118 class? Like, what did you see?
Very much like Kyle, it came across my YouTube feed. It was during a time where I was also in college, and I was trying to branch out and see much more perspectives on life. Because I want to know more about other people. I was at that time going to get a degree in education, which I am now partaking in as a teacher. And it's one of those things where I wanted to be able to connect to my students more. I wanted to be able to connect to other people more. So your classes came across my feed, and it was like, what are all these different perspectives that are available? Because I genuinely want to understand other people.
Do you think the people around you, okay, this is one of the questions I would ask my students. Do you feel like people around you are like you? Like they
No, not at all.
Yeah? How? They don't want to understand other people?
I am a Republican in a completely democratic state. Like, I can vote in everything, and I will never have my vote matter.
Okay, but let me go back to this side. You want to understand other perspectives, right?
Right.
Okay. To what degree are people around you like that? Like they really genuinely want to understand other perspectives?
I would say most people don't.
Yeah.
I see this in schools as well. We really preach a lot of tolerance, and it really just breeds intolerance, and it's really rough. Earlier, you're talking about your conservative talking point when you're trying to get the conservative point of view, and who was it that said, "Oh, but I'm not a conservative, but here's the conservative point of view"? Yeah. I really relate to that. College was not a safe space for me. It was a location.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead. Finish your thought.
It was a location where I had to mask who I was if I wanted to have any social impact. And if something that I really disliked about my program that I was in is that I needed an 85% to pass my program. And 15% of my grade was on professional conduct, which really just kind of boils down to what does the teacher think of you? And I'm definitely not a 100% student, so it's like there's no way I'm rocking this boat.
So what that means then, so here's the problem with this, right? What it means is that you never got to test out which of your so-called more conservative ideas were nonsense and which of them were actually really thoughtful. And other students, then, they don't get to test out which of their so-called liberal ideas are nonsense and which of them are actually really thoughtful. And like, I see this with a lot of my liberal students. They say some really, really dumb things. And I'm just like, oh man. And I see it with my conservative students, same thing. They say really dumb. Okay, dumb. I don't mean dumb. I mean, I'm sorry. Things that are just have not been thought through. They're just talking points that they heard somewhere and they say it and they repeat it, and they wouldn't, At the moment you challenge a little bit, they fall apart. They have nothing to say. So you never got to really really fine tune these ideas, right? And so you then what a disservice, right? Because then you end up not being really educated about a whole realm of thinking that you feel drawn to, but needed to be challenged on. Yeah. Would you? How does that sound?
There's a lot of ideas that I had that I know are bad, but I don't know why they're bad. But I never get to have the conversations about them because the moment I bring them up, I might as well be wearing a MAGA hat, and that's just
right.
Social death.
You don't. Yeah, I got you. When you say bad, meaning that you had ideas that you didn't really think through. They were kind of shallow. And that's what college is about. Yeah, you throw stuff out. I tell my students, man, just go argue with each other. We have a preacher on campus, Gary the Willard preacher. I think I talked about him in the last stream. He's really smart. He's great at debating. He's just amazing. And I tell my students, go debate those who are offended by Gary. I'm like, go debate him, man. Go tell him how and why you're offended. And see if you can stand up to him for even 10 minutes, because he'll come back with a lot of stuff and you're going to walk away and you're going to be thinking about all sorts of things differently. And that's what it's all about. And of course, that's what I've been doing for, 40 years or so. Right. And I'm still more confused than I ever was. Marie. Yeah.
Yes. Just to add on to what Christian had brought up. So in that case, there's always an underlying political whatever, the unspoken rules or what have you, which it almost feels like he responded to them. Where in my setting, if I were to say my views that were not liberal, or either way, we're guided by wherever the pendulum swings. A lot of times, prisons, you wouldn't believe that the New York State prisons and under our governor, and I'm not going there, but have become very liberal.
Yeah.
Where that gets scary is they run things and they tell us what to do, which is why I'm not doing that anymore. But
but what you're saying is it's going to swing back.
Yes,
right?
So all the way to Republican. But I think we functioned best, to be honest, when we were somewhere in the middle. Safety and security always had to be first. Whereas now they're hotlining lawyers if you give them homework. And that's not abusive whatsoever. So we're way, and not to bring all of that in, but we're guided by the laws of the state as well. So if you say anything in a system like that, if we show a certain movie or whatever, you get the riot act. It becomes a very legal situation.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Yeah, finish.
Oh, no. And these are just opinions, but you can't agree to disagree in a setting that way. And I find it so refreshing. But I just want to say one more thing. And it's not, I don't really have a comment, but I hadn't seen the video with Nicholas Sandman, but there was the American Indian indigenous man playing the drum. And I don't know if anybody saw the Hebrew Israelites. So the real video has not surfaced. So if you have shown the entire video, I think that's great. I hadn't seen that episode, but that tells you everything you need to know about America right now.
Yeah.
So I thought that just the video alone was,
a funny story with the Hebrew Israelites are the ones that were really like, man, just tweaking that whole story. Jeff will put the link to that video. They came after us. They came after Social 19, the Israelites.
Oh, really?
About 6 months before that video.
After my last book.
But they don't have any power. I mean, they have nothing. They have no power or whatever. But they really hammered us on our live stream and on a video, different things. They were just it was. I mean, I don't know. I guess for me, it's kind of fun for Jeff and I to see that sort of thing.
But it's interesting that you have a Native American man it was an indigenous festival, by the way. It wasn't a whole election thing. But he's just celebrating, and then this sparks up. But it's
Yeah.
interesting. Now, I again come from a prison system. We go to the group of the riot that we can squash because
Yeah.
we need
Yeah.
to. When you have hundreds of people that are criminals that are trying to kill one another, you
Yeah. Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
go to whoever you think you can de escalate, is the word. And he went to teenagers rather
Yeah.
than adults.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very telling in coming
Well,
from where what I, you know.
Well, I think that okay, so here's one of the things about one thing I'm trying to do in that area. I'd like to hear you say something on this. I'm not I'm assuming that um we get our stories, right? We see the headlines in the news and we get those stories.
Mhm.
And then we grab onto those stories and then they become sort of the places we put them in our minds and then we run our thoughts around them. And then there's stepping stones, right? And then
Yeah.
we think that kind of the world is like that. But what I've discovered just in my life is, and we've all discovered, and what I'm hearing from all of you actually, is that the world's actually really complicated. And it's not like that. It's not these individual stories that, we're just in the United States, we're 330 million people and it's immensely complicated. And, the four of you have immensely complicated ways of seeing the world and they can't easily be pigeonholed and put inside of a box. And everybody is like that. And what I'm always trying to do is take these complicated issues, break them down into their kind of simple constituent parts, and then like try to put them together in some way and show how really complicated everything is, like
Mhm.
having a government, for example.
Mhm.
And so that people walk away both with greater clarity and with greater confusion about whatever the issue is that we're talking about. And sometimes, if you start a video halfway through, you think, okay, I'm making point A, but if you started at the beginning, you'd think I'm making point B or whatever the case is, right? And so for you, Ari, this guy out, out in Las Vegas, right, who's
Mhm.
doing all these things, you strike me as a person who's also all of you, right? But your mind is going around in that way, and so that would be really useful for you to watch the Social 19 videos.
Yeah, man. I definitely adore what you do because I mean, so I am totally kind of confused with how the world is operating these days because I don't understand the motives of how these narratives are being put together by both sides, by the media and things like that, and
Yeah.
why things are presented the way that they are, and why we're not able to have actual discourse and policy discussions and things like that. And but that's why I enjoy what you do is because you are having that. You are,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, I was describing what you do to somebody a couple days ago, and I kind of like basically say you're like a devil's advocate,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
like you're you'll take some sort of topic where there's a common opinion and you'll say but and then you'll give some counter evidence to the fact and you'll make someone think make your students think like okay but this evidence doesn't support this commonly held opinion so what do you have to say about that like I saw some videos that you posted years back during like some like the Black Lives Matter stuff about like actual statistics about like police shootings and like what the probability were. Yeah. And just what it just goes to show you like again going to like the narratives and I don't understand why the media is doing what they're doing as far as how they're presenting these things. And
well, here I can respond. Let me respond to it, and then have you respond to what I'm going to say. I'm going to answer your question as best as a sociologist, and then I want to hear you respond, and then I want to go to Kyle. I think that you got to really think that 330 just in the United States. Forget about the world, like just right here, right? you got 330 million people. You got media, which media it's it's a plural, right? So it's just
Yep.
and people just putting things out there just as fast and furiously as they can, copying what other people are doing. Because that's what we do, right? Because most people are writing are not trying to complicate it. They're trying to write something or visualize something or show something that's as simple as possible and as fast as short as possible to get people to grab onto it and think that when they get to the end, they understood something. Okay. So you got to make it really simple. So complexity is out the window. So you're asking like, well, why do we do this? Well, we do it because we're a whole bunch of people with jumbled up viewpoints and perspectives, and we're all trying to make sense of
Yeah,
our
when you do it and
perspectives.
it's obvious that it's damaging to the nation,
Mhm.
but then you
Yeah.
do it again for the next 4 or 5 years. It's like, why are they still doing it?
Well, here my take on that. I heard a take on that is like actually a lot of it just opened a light bulb in my brain, because what we developed over time are these really, really, really strong two political parties. And the parties are the ones that are spending billions and billions and billions of dollars. And so many people, like at the world, our system is organized around these two parties more than anything. And so the more they're just trying to capture certain ideas, the more it just goes, and you just can't stop it. Even though if you stop any individual on the street, just like the five of us, they're going to say, no, I don't see the world in those very simplistic ways. I see it in a very complex way. But sociologically speaking, how do you stop that? Like, how do you stop it? It's like, it's like go out on the freeway between Las Vegas and LA and try to stop the traffic with like traffic cones. Like, you just can't. You just can't. It just is what it is. And so I think that's kind of where we're at. I don't think there's a conspiracy. I just think it's
either
basic
way,
sociology.
I'm a opposite of a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah,
right?
you don't.
Like,
I'm not saying that you're a conspiracy. Yeah, you're definitely not a conspiracy person. And I think,
you're talking,
I don't.
You're talking inertia, basically.
Inertia, exactly. It's inertia. Yeah. Hey, I saw this with the Sandusky scandal here, the Paterno-Sandusky scandal at Penn State.
Yeah.
When that broke, what you watched was within days there were like 20 or 25 satellite trucks lined up on the main avenue here, and they all were trying to tell a story, but there was no information out there to be had. And by the way, my class was the first public space at Penn State where we openly talked about it 2 days later. And the back of the classroom was lined up with reporters, because word got out on Twitter that my wife and I were going to be in my social 19 class, and we were going to talk about the Sandusky scandal. And it was just like lined up with reporters. But all these reporters just kept telling the same story over and over again because they didn't have anything else to tell. And I'm like, yeah, that's how there it is all the time, man. There it is. And so
that's gossip, though. Stuff that's like divisive, like race and things like that. I mean, it's so, that's the stuff that's so depressing to me. And it just, it's toxic, man. It's like, because we are moving backwards in that. I don't think there's any other way to see our status quo as
well. I think it seems like it's.
I grew up in this country, in my teens. There was not the animus between black and white, or even like I'm Jewish, black and Jewish, for example, that there is today, and everything is just so exacerbated right now. And I just feel like it's very much driven by content, And
okay, listen, I'm gonna give you an answer to that, and I want to hear you respond, and I want to hear Kyle. I want to hear what Kyle and Christian, you can jump in. I actually think that we get along now better than we ever have. Okay, we really are. Like, you talk about the animosity between groups, but we really are getting on. People are. I'm gonna throw this out as a hypothesis. Okay, social media has a. I hear you. No, I think that I would say this as well, but now I'm going to try to speak as a sociologist, and I'm going to throw a positive twist to this. Okay. I think that maybe the social media makes it appear as though we're far more divisive than we actually are. Okay. That if you look at people getting along together, and I'm looking at different racial groups and people of different ancestries and so on, people are really getting on well together for the most part. If you watch the headlines and, you watch, like various videos of, gangs of youth in Philly storming into stores and stealing stuff and whatever. Okay, we can see all that, but mostly, I think that I think we're going to move forward. We're fine. We're moving forward, sociologically speaking. Although it appears as though we're more divisive and we're going backwards, but I'm not sure that we are. Now, mind you, I might be wrong. In some ways, we are for sure, right? I mean, some ways we are, but I don't know.
From my understanding, shows that like it seems to be there's more of a racial divide. And I don't think it's just social media. I think the actual media outlets, the CNNs, the Fox Newses, the MSNBCs, they're also like they're helping to create the divide. Where it's like
I hear you, but I think if you put people in a room together, like if we do these focus groups and we put like groups of 15 people in rooms of various backgrounds and so on, I have a feeling that they would more quickly come to a consensus with each other than they would have 30 or 40 years ago. And I think that the divides are actually in their attitudes. They might say that they're more divided, but if you put them in a room, just like here we are, they're actually not more divided. And so you got to wonder, like, okay, is it certain people's interest to divide people, or is it just the inertia thing that happens? So Kyle, hang on, Marie, Kyle, what do you think about that explanation right there?
I disagree completely.
Okay, good.
And I'll give you some reasons why. When Christian was talking about college not being a safe space, I've had this conversation before with people close to me that have said, well, it happens on both sides. I didn't consider myself to be conservative until the late 2010s. I at one point in time, I sort of naturally came to conclusions that I shared with my mom, and she was like, that's communism. So like that's where I was at one point when I was a teenager. I'm like an atheist communist saying wild stuff, and people would put up with me.
I was there too.
And then as I got older and started challenging things just here and there, I lost best friends over things that felt safe. Like I lost a guy that I would have asked to be in my wedding party for suggesting that we divorce the sentiment of Black Lives Matter and the organization of Black Lives Matter. And that was insane to me. That seems like that should be a very safe thing, and it was not. And
wait, you're saying the ideas and then the organization itself. The ideas are one thing,
so,
the organization is another. Okay.
Not even the ideas per se, but there's this thing that happens a lot in these social movements where there's a linguistics game, and we call it Black Lives Matter so that we can dance back and forth on, are we talking about an organization, or are we talking about the idea that Black Lives Matter?
Right.
And we can kind of straddle that line and use whichever side of it is useful at the time. And I was like, guys, you realize this is happening, that people are doing this dance over organization and sentiment. And that legitimately lost me a best friend. And not only did it lose me a best friend, but I had 3 Black people. This was a white guy. I had 3 separate Black people weigh in, and they're like, yes, he is right. And this kid could not back off the position.
Wait, they were saying that you are right. They were saying you, Kyle, are right. Yeah.
And he was just, no, that's evil. You're evil. I didn't realize that before now, but now I do. And this has happened. So this has happened with almost 10 people. in my life for things like that.
Okay.
And so when you said, do you think that people are really testing their views? No, I couldn't get somebody to read a Thomas Sowell book if I tried, if they didn't agree with me. Did I read Bernie Sanders' book? Did I read Ta-Nehisi Coates? Yes, I did. I can't get somebody to do it the other direction.
Yeah. Okay. So go back to what I said. I hear what you're saying, man. So if we randomly put 15 people in a room and said, hey, for 2 hours, we're going to talk about social issues. And they were from all different, backgrounds and perspectives and so on. I have the sense that they would agree on far more things than they would disagree on. Christian,
yes,
you would say
go ahead, Christian.
I would agree with that.
Kyle, would you say that?
Yes, I think though that you were onto something with social media. I think that there is a digital psychology separate from your actual in-person psychology, and that people are more likely to honor kind of social contracts, unspoken social contracts in person. But I do think that the digital psychology is starting to find its way into the real world.
Yeah. Okay. I got you. Yeah. Hey, Marie. And then, hang on. Let's go to Christian first, and then we'll go to Marie. Christian, so you said that you think that people could agree.
I do think that people generally are getting along better now than they used to. That being said, I see social media as mostly a negative, as it's really algorithm based, and it's so easy just to be led one direction. And the company and the algorithms benefit for you going down one rabbit hole. And when you're in these spaces, these are all anonymous people. You get to be as mean or as nice as you want to really anyone with no issues, as long as they're just a name on a screen. And what this really does, you're going to group up with the people who you agree with. It's going to be easier for me to sit in a room of 5 people who all look like, all talk like, all sound like me. Like, this is just where I'm going to eventually end up. Like, I will more than likely end up in a room with these 3 other people than a room of other people. And it's just because it's more comfortable for me that way.
This is the place in which human beings have not evolved quickly enough to adapt to the kind of technological possibilities that are available to us, right?
It's
so these algorithms, they have outpaced our ability to establish, as sociologists, let me just speak as a sociologist, to establish social systems and sociological systems that allow us to find ways to combat the deleterious effects of these algorithms. And we can't do it. We don't know how to do it. And human beings, we will be, I'm not going to say lazy, but there's going to be a tendency to go toward things for most people, right? It's not always true. There are people like myself who just I find something is completely opposite of what I believe, and I just want to go toward it immediately. Or like a food, or when I'm traveling, I look at something that makes me a little bit uncomfortable or uncertain, and I go toward it. I want to explore it. But most people are not like that. And so, Christian, I'm with you that this is but yet people surprisingly get on. If you actually get them to sit down and talk with each other, right? They are surprisingly thoughtful and complex. Hey, Marie, you were going to jump in.
Yes. So this is sort of piggybacking on what Ari brought up first, then Kyle, then Christian, and yourself. So there's a couple things. So I always go at it at the psych standpoint, or the civic education standpoint. That's my background, psychology and civic education, etc. In civic education, we taught We the People. We work with lawyers, judges, the whole gamut. And that was part of my pilot course. And what we basically do is, our motto is now we teach kids how to think. And our issue, I think there's a huge problem pulling in the social media, and what Ari said, I see that as well. What Kyle said, I see all of that. And I'll tell you just how, real quickly. We are dealing with something, and I've seen a lot of this. Tens of thousands of youth that are now adults. They're in colleges all over the place. They're speaking. A lot of times, these are self-appointed philosophers and whatever on television or what have you, leading movements, doing this, doing that, you name it.
Mhm.
We have what's called a mob thinking, mob
Yeah,
mentality, mob,
for sure.
which is on, right. And so much so that literally, so the books I write are very controversial. I mean, the title is Black, Red, Yellow, and White Lies Matter Too. Lies, like narratives.
Yeah.
Where I, knowing I'm part Black, at least a little bit, had to verify my Blackness to be able to
Yeah.
speak to America and put books out there. And that's where I feel it's our actual thinking that's divided. And why? Because we are of the mob mentality. We no longer, I mean, we're getting back to teaching youth how to think. You're doing
Yeah.
that. However,
But
about 20 years ago, we were not. We were teaching them what to think.
well, actually, though, okay, so hang on. I
Mhm.
actually feel like mass education has always been kind of built around I don't want to call it a mom mentality, but look, you can't educate large groups of people unless you get them to follow the paths that others are following, right? I mean, this is the only way you can do it. This goes back to what Ari said about like big government stuff, right? It's so much easier just pass one law up here that affects everything else as opposed to going state by state or county by county or whatever the case is. And so it really is, it's just incredibly difficult to have a large society with lots of small collectivities and groupings of people who we're helping to think on their own terms and for themselves and by themselves and so on. Like it's just it's nearly impossible. And but we have to just keep doing our best. You just do the best to try to make it happen. But it's not like it's like freedom. Freedom doesn't exist. You just are, or democracy doesn't exist. You just are more democratic or you're less democratic, and you're more free or you're less free, but you're never free. And I think that's the way maybe with education in some way. Kyle or Ari, go ahead. Yeah. Hey, we're going to try to cut it in about 11 minutes, right? But Ari, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a couple quick things. I'll try and keep it brief. I was going to say that, first, one thing someone said to me recently, I thought it was kind of funny that the main thing that the gay and conservative community have in common is that, you both have to live in the closet half the time. And it's because it's like, I think it was Kyle who was saying it earlier, that, or maybe it was Christian. That was Christian actually, who was saying it earlier. Like, we are in a society today, and I think people to the left or liberals, whoever, they don't realize it, that like they are of a mindset where like they might think they're open-minded, but you really can't be openly conservative in a lot of ways. There's this notion or adage, or however you want to put it, that exists at least among the right, where like when a conservative and a liberal disagree, a conservative thinks the liberal is wrong, a liberal thinks the conservative is evil. So
dumb,
it's like,
or dumb. Yeah.
Right, there you go. So and it's just what something that the average person doesn't necessarily realize, that makes things so daunting. Because I actually enrolled in some graduate courses at UNLV in what do you call it, political I'm drawing a blank on it,
political economy, maybe.
No, and just in political whatchamacallit,
political science.
Political
All right.
science, right? And I didn't even make it through a full semester because literally my professors, they were bullies. Like there was a couple of conservatives in the class, and they were like, not only were they like laughing at the conservatives whenever they would like bring up different ideas, they would get the other students to gang up on you, and the way that they would grade you in your writings, you know, versus the way they would grade the other students. It was just I saw what was happening. I was like, I'm not going to bother going through this, and I just, you know, moved on to the next thing in my life, kind of thing. It was, you know, I thought I was going to dabble. I didn't even enroll. I just took a couple classes. I didn't, you know, go into enroll in school. But anyway, what the average person doesn't think about is, yes, there are these two sides going on, but the left dominates when it comes to pop culture, when it comes to education. When it, like so they pretty much dominate in all streams of thought, except for maybe when it comes to, like, you know, religious schools of thought. Like, so if you grow up in a religious community, or maybe when it comes up to, like, you know, they have conservative radio and Fox News, I guess, but virtually all other streams of media. So when it comes to, like, what we've seen recently with social media, how social media has dominated the algorithms, like with like past elections, with the universities, with public schools, with the public sector unions. Literally almost all streams of thought and information are dominated by the left. So it's such like a thing for somebody to like have any of these thought processes, and now with like all of these look at what's going on right now with, you know, these you know, speech police and things like that. And you know, as a Jewish person,
let me interrupt you. I want to I see where you're going. So here's the thought. So what I hear you saying is there's a so-called, there are certain types of liberal narrative that are pretty dominant and very strong, and they're very strong in popular culture. There's also a very strong conservative narrative, but it's like it's over here. It's in its spots. You know, like Fox News is pretty amazing, right? And
but that's my choice. The education.
No, I hear you. Yep. And in an education system, because what I'm talking about, a true conservative perspective, like really thoughtful conservative perspective, which is, I think, in many ways, we've kind of been talking about here. That's not taught. That's not laid out there. And if it's not laid out there,
right?
No, you're not. Yeah, you don't find. You're not going to find it in education systems. You're not. It's not there in the same way. And so we don't give people the opportunity to really explore the wide range of thinking that happens or has to happen if you want to be a thoughtful, educated person. And it's funny because, and Christian, I'm going to go to you. When I meet people who are really intense, really smart scholars, like really, really thoughtful scholars in my life, I never know if they're liberal or conservative, so-called liberal or so-called conservative. I never know that. I talk to them and I'm just like, whoa, your thinking is so complex and so layered, but I don't know. I wouldn't know who you voted for. I wouldn't know, voting isn't a mark of your political beliefs anyway, because you're going to be limited. But so I'm with you on that. Christian, what were you going to add in?
So I actually want to put out some positivity and not necessarily as negative of a mindset out there. I think that the organizations, a lot of medias, a lot of different, like, let's say Hollywood, let's say our universities, there's a reason why more liberal people are going there. And it's because the conservatives are mostly going to politically say, no, hold up, stop. That's a bad idea. Let's calm down. Let's go back to our traditional values. We're saying no. We're saying stop a lot of the times. We're not creating new things because that's not what conservatives do. We're holding to our traditional values, right? And a lot of times that sounds really mean. That sounds really hateful.
Yeah, that's it. That's a really interesting That's an interesting thing. But I could make the argument. I got a lot of things that I could point out. Whether it's, I hear what you're saying. It's actually a really interesting thought. But there are a lot of things I could point out that, look, first off, like conservatives, Kyle, I don't know what you think about this, but like, if you want whatever it is, whether it's drug decriminal, whatever it is that people do with their bodies, like prostitution, using drugs, abortion, however it is, selling their own organs to somebody else. If I want to sell my kidney to somebody and make $20,000, whatever that would be. True conservative thinking would be, hey, this give as much liberty to every single individual as long as they're not hurting someone else. They don't sell somebody else's organ, but if you want to sell your organ, like, that's okay.
Consenting adults.
Yeah, consenting adults. But what we see is we're seeing that this kind of movement in the United States that's called conservatism. And I wonder if you, Kyle, I wonder if you would agree with this.
At one time, I would have agreed with that.
No, hang on. Let me finish it.
Yeah,
that we see this kind of movement of conservatives who are actually acting more like we're gonna be at the top and we're gonna make decisions for everybody else, like with, whether it's drugs or prostitution or whatever. And we're actually going to act not like true conservatives. We're going to act the opposite of conservatives. And we're going to try to control everybody's behavior who's under us for whatever reason. Maybe it's our belief in God or religious belief, whatever it is. I don't know. Kyle, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, it's a very libertarian view. I wouldn't consider myself to be libertarian per se. I do believe in personal liberty, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, those sort of things. I think there are things, though, that do start to torpedo the fabric of civilization. That are very harmful, and we've reached a point, kind of to your point earlier, that we are just not capable of handling the internet really well. The communication of social media, the readiness of, say, pornography. We watched this kind of in tandem was the launch of Instagram and the rise of suicide rates in women in a pretty drastic way for the first time in 50 years, something to that effect. And so I don't know that I necessarily agree on that front. Ari had mentioned earlier too, kind of.
No, I actually hear that you are agreeing in a way, but go ahead. Yeah.
Those are tough questions.
Yeah. Ari mentioned earlier too, the sort of conservative bastions, and one of them was the church. But even the deconstruction movement is starting to pull that apart. And so it is not, what I see is not a balance where it's like, believe what you want. It is a believe what you want and make sure that you try to convince as many people as possible. And it's, it's not a question of like, do we want equal rights? Do we want liberties? It's, it gets to the point, we hear this kind of in the trans conversation now, where you need to use my pronouns. If not, you are encouraging me to commit suicide or at least contemplate. And that's a little out there for me.
Well, okay, so here's one for us. Here, I'll give you an example. We know, this is where me as a sociologist, where I really struggle with the question of liberties, right? We know that these like big sodas that people are drinking, right? 64 ounce, 88 ounce, I don't know. They're unhealthy. It's a problem, right? People want to drink them, that's fine, but there are consequences for society. And the consequences are, in the end, when your health goes down the tubes, we are gonna treat you like we will. And some people won't get treated because they don't have insurance, a few people, but the vast majority of people, it's gonna go on to the rest of us, the taxpayers, and we're gonna have to take care of your diabetes and all the other ailments that come along with the fact that you spent your life freely because you wanted to, drinking the 64 ounce sodas, like 5 or 6 of them a day or whatever the case is. And so now me as a sociologist says, hey, look, man, I want you to have your freedom there, but at the same time, like, come on, man. When it's just one, if it's just Christian doing this, by the time he is my age, we're going to have to be dealing with his health problems. But when it's 1 million Christians, or 5 million, or 10 million, or 20 million, then we say, like, hang on, it would be really smart of us as a society just ban 64-ounce sodas. It really would. I know it's taking liberties away, but it really makes sense. It's going to be better for everybody, right? But yet,
or the opposite side of it is you have no like social security net, and there's no laws. It's like with immigration laws. You have completely open borders, but then there's no welfare programs. There's no, you know what I mean? So like,
so somehow you got to be a balance. Yeah, you got to be a balance. So Kyle, let me ask you. So, or Christian, either one of you. So my example of the soda, it's like, it would be really in a well-run society, you would be like, hey, can we have a public conversation about this? Really, do you really? Let's look at what it's going to cost, man. Can we really think about this? That's the society that I would want. That's what I'm trying to do in my class. Like, can we really think about this? But you don't want it. Then it becomes politicized, and of course, that's where it falls apart, right? So, do you guys? Would Kyle and Christian, would you both agree? Like, in a well-run society, we would sit down, we'd have thoughtful conversations about this. Something
absolutely.
Like that.
Yeah.
Or gun control.
Kyle, do you want to say anything on this, or?
Only one thing is, I understand that's how Canada works now, isn't it, on the soda front?
Well, in some states, in some cities, like New York City, really tried to curtail it, and
but they're not
in European states. I mean, it just becomes, But then when it gets sold to the rest of the people, it gets sold as an extremist idea. And of course, then it becomes an extremist idea if it hasn't been thoughtfully implemented and thought through. Well, the same is true with guns. There just are, I read the stories of the road rage and stuff. And accidents. There just are going to happen. And I get the Second Amendment, I get the whole thing, but you just have to accept a certain amount of bad behavior and really troubling and disturbing behavior. And that's where we're at in the world. We're all trying to decide how much of the bad behavior and the negative things we're willing to accept. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, man. Hey, I think we should just wrap it up. But hey, thanks for everybody. Thanks for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. Mostly I appreciate you watching the stream and that you would be willing to come on. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
I love the channel, man. Consider it an honor to be included. Seriously.
Oh man, I consider it an honor that 4 human beings from 4 different parts of the country would say, "Hey, I'll hop on turn my camera on, and we'll talk." Yeah.
The nice thing is we for the most part agree, and we're from 4 different areas. It's an interesting twist there. Surprising.
If I would have brought 4, it doesn't matter who I would bring on, we would mostly agree. Yeah. That's the thing. That's what. And Kyle, that point at which you said you disagree with me, I also disagreed with me. I want you to know that.
Well, that's all I was looking for. I can't stand anybody disagreeing with me. So.
Yeah, man. I got it. So amazing how well, all of these things for me, as I think like my sociological stuff, it's so complicated to say in words what it is that I see, and so, hey, Christian, thanks for hanging in there and coming back on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry about the whole internet thing. Like, I got here an hour early and it was like completely fine the entire time. Then it starts, it's like, oh, internet better stop.
Yeah,
I blame Comcast.
Blame Comcast. All right, listen, y'all. Thanks.
Happy holidays.
Hey, thanks, Judson. I appreciate it. And everybody watching, like, thanks for watching. Hey, on Thursday, we're going to have 3 or 4 guests. we're going to talk from Europe, and we're going to talk about immigration in Europe and how Europeans are just seeing this and what's happening, because there's a rise in nationalism in Europe, which completely makes sense if you watch what's going on, man. And nationalism gets seen in this kind of negative way, like these right-wing extremist kind of thing. But if you think about nationalism, it's people who are thinking about the borders of their country and the culture of their country. Makes complete sense that we would see a rise of people reacting to some things. Hey, opinionated Matt, by the way, can you reach out to us? Because I'm thinking it would be nice if you could talk about Italy. Right? So maybe ping Jeff. All right. Okay, everybody. Thanks, man. Once again, really appreciate it.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure.
Yeah.
Take care.